A shadow approached down the hallway, slow and quiet. Hannah stood up, hand on her belly, heart racing. "Who's there?" she asked softly. No reply. The figure stepped into the chandelier's glow, and there they met, eye to eye. Julian, tall, dressed in a white shirt, one arm in a sling, face slightly pale. Yet even in his frailty, he stood firm, as if used to pain, as if unfamiliar with strangers. Hannah gripped the veranda rail, her eyes widened. "It's him," she thought. "The bleeding man, the one I saved, and the one from that night." But Julian's eyes showed no recognition. He stared at Hannah like a stranger, perhaps tired, annoyed, or surprised. He didn't seem to know who she was. "Who are you?" Julian asked coldly. Hannah didn't answer. She froze where she stood, eyes locked with his. Both frowned, both confused. "Who are you?" A question that hurt more than expected. It wasn't just cold. It was a blade slicing through her chest, reminding her of all she'd hidden. She wanted to say, "I'm the girl from the club. The girl who was with you that night, the one carrying your child now." But she couldn't. Maybe it was shame, maybe fear, or maybe it was the strange, piercing pain of not being recognized. After that night, Hannah and Julian didn't see each other again. He stayed in his room. The routine returned. Quiet mornings and quiet nights. Hannah remembered something. While cleaning out an old bag, she found the ID she'd been meaning to return, but she never knew how. Now it was clear. Julian Asiero. The photo, the name, the face. "What is this?" she whispered, holding the ID. "I'm such a fool. How did I not realize it was him? How did I not guess I had entered his family's home?" She touched her belly. She felt the baby stir. There was no one else in the room. Just her and the truth. "Baby," she whispered. "Don't worry. Even if I don't tell him, it's okay. Even if it's just me, I'll manage. I can be your mom and dad." She slipped the ID back into her old bag. A secret that would remain her secret. Weeks passed, and the days became a routine again. Waking up, folding laundry, sewing old clothes. From time to time, Hannah would chat with Don Julio, who seemed to grow more fond of her. Once, while they drank coffee on the veranda, he said, "When you give birth, Hannah, I want you to stay. You're not just a guest anymore. You're part of this household." Hannah smiled. "Thank you, Don Julio." But behind that smile hid sorrow, secrets, and memories. Every night before sleep, Hannah's mind returned to that night. The loud, crowded club, the flashing lights, the scent of alcohol. Julian, dressed in black with sharp eyes. In the morning, she woke up in a hotel bed, covered only by a blanket. Julian was asleep, his back turned. She couldn't remember everything, but the fragments were enough. And from there, everything began. A few days before her due date, her back pain worsened. Her belly tightened more often. Still, Hannah wasn't used to being idle. Despite the luxury, she still preferred to be busy folding, sewing, rinsing. One morning, nearly everyone in the mansion was gone. There was an event elsewhere. Don Julio had left for a meeting. It was 11 a.m. The sun was blazing. Hannah was walking down the hallway to get a drink from the kitchen when suddenly pain gripped her belly. She screamed, "This can't be it. Not yet." Ah! But in the next second, it felt like two hands had struck her hips. Hard, heavy, painful. She sat down against the wall, panting, heart racing. "Baby, please hold on." She tried to stand. She spotted a telephone across the hall and began walking. One step, 2, 3. Her vision blurred as she reached for the phone. "Help, please." Hannah, a familiar voice. She turned. Julian, still wearing a white shirt, slightly pale, but alert. He stood several feet away, and in that moment, there was no anger in his face, no confusion, only fear. "Hannah, what's happening?" "My baby, I think I'm going into labor." She couldn't finish. She collapsed. Footsteps, strong arms caught her, warmth as he pressed her against his chest, then running, her name being shouted. Hannah, wake up. Rosa, did someone call the ambulance? Hannah, I've got you. I won't leave you. That was the last thing she heard. Then came the light, a white ceiling, the smell of alcohol, the beeping of monitors, and the cry of a newborn baby. Slowly, Hannah opened her eyes. Beside her, a nurse smiled. Congratulations, Mom. It's a baby boy. He's healthy. He's in the nursery now. Tears filled Hannah's eyes. She didn't know if it was from exhaustion or overwhelming joy. How is he? She asked weakly. He's strong. Have you chosen a name? Hannah smiled through her tears. Asher, she whispered. My son's name is Asher. The next day, Don Julio arrived at the hospital carrying massive bouquets and a stuffed toy bigger than the hospital bed. As he entered the room, Hannah, congratulations. Hannah nodded, trying to sit, but the old man stopped her. No need, dear God. It's like an angel has arrived in this world. That's my great-grandchild, he continued proudly. The baby of the woman who saved my grandson, raised under my roof. You're part of this family now, and he's such a handsome little boy. Hannah could only laugh quietly, wiping her tears. When they returned to the mansion, something in the air had changed. Julian was no longer the cold man he had once been. He became quiet, but always present. He was there in the nursery, always peeking in when Hannah breastfed, and though he rarely spoke, he often stared at the baby, as if seeing something deeper than what his eyes allowed. One night, Hannah found Julian sitting beside Asher's crib, quiet, just watching. Hey, she greeted. Julian nodded silently. You're still up? Yeah, the nerves are getting to me. First time, you know, Hannah chuckled. You seem like a natural. I don't even know how I managed to do all this, he replied softly. Silence followed. Then Julian spoke again. Hannah, he said her name gently. Thanks. Hannah looked at him. For what? Julian didn't answer. He just smiled faintly. But in his eyes, there was something new. Trust, warmth, and something deeper she couldn't yet name. And that was the beginning of the change Hannah had long been waiting for. The mansion was quiet, except for the soft giggle of a baby from the nursery. Weeks had passed since Asher was born, and with each day, the atmosphere shifted, especially with Julian. He was no longer locked away in his room. He was often in the hallways, the nursery, even the kitchen. Once, just standing by the fridge, holding Asher's milk, and the way he looked at Hannah, it was no longer distant. There was a search in his gaze, as though trying to understand something only she could answer. Why are you always so quiet? Hannah once asked as they sat together on the veranda, rocking Asher to sleep. Julian looked at her for a second before glancing away. Just thinking. You're always like that, she teased, like a puzzle I don't know whether to solve or run from. Julian turned to her again, but this time with a small smile. And you're like a question I keep trying to answer. Sometimes late at night, they would find themselves talking at length. From simple, how was your day, to long discussions about favorite food, movies, and music. Hannah was vibrant and full of color. Julian was reserved but deep. Why did you keep to yourself for so long? She asked one day while changing Asher's diaper. Julian sat nearby, watching. I didn't choose it. That's just how I am. I'm used to being alone. It's easier when no one depends on you. But doesn't it feel nice knowing someone's there to lean on? Hannah asked, rocking Asher gently on her shoulder. It doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're human. Julian stayed silent, then finally nodded. Maybe. One day, they walked together through the garden. Hannah carried Asher in a baby carrier like a mother leading a school field trip. Julian followed quietly, holding the baby bag. It looked amusing from a distance, but for Hannah, it was one of her happiest mornings at the mansion. Do you want to know what Asher's first word will be? She asked, smiling while pointing at flowers for the baby. If his first word is Papa, I'll crawl the entire hallway on my knees, Julian joked. Hannah laughed. Really? I hope he says it then. I'll record it. Julian grinned. A real one. Not the formal smile of a rich man, but the genuine smile of a person. You know, Julian, she said as they sat beneath a tree. I sometimes wonder if you ever had a child, what kind of father would you be? Julian looked at her. I don't know, he replied, then glanced at Asher. But for a kid like this, I think I'd do everything. Hannah looked down, unsure if she felt joy or pain, because she didn't know if Julian meant it the way she hoped, or simply as a man who happened to be in their lives. One night, as Julian handed her Asher's milk bottle, their hands accidentally touched, just for a second, but the world seemed to pause. Sorry, they both said in unison, then laughed. But in that laugh was something else. Not yet love, but perhaps the start. While Hannah rocked Asher to sleep in the nursery, Julian walked in quietly. In his hands was a small toy, a stuffed dinosaur. I bought this earlier at the mall, he said. I didn't know if it was okay. Hannah smiled. He'll love it. Thank you. Julian nodded. I want to be around him. Hannah paused. Why? I don't know, he answered, looking down at the crib. But when I'm with both of you, it feels like something that was missing is becoming whole again. Hannah didn't know how to reply. Instead, she moved closer, and they stood side by side, watching Asher sleep. In the silence, a question lingered in her mind. How would she ever tell him the truth that Asher was his son? But she didn't ask. Not tonight. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the mansion's windows, a convoy of cars arrived. Luxury vehicles, one after another. The household staff rushed out in anticipation. Hannah, from upstairs holding Asher, saw it all. She heard Don Julio's voice from below. Ah, Valeria, dear. Hannah turned to look just as Julian stiffened beside her. She's here, he muttered. Who? Hannah asked, sensing the tension in his voice. Julian didn't answer. He went downstairs. Valeria Iosta entered. The supermodel from the U.S. Tall, long, straight hair, a graceful neck, and a sculpted figure. Her voice echoed through the living room, sweet but full of confidence. Julian, baby, I missed you, she cried, hugging him and waving to Don Julio. From the nursery upstairs, Hannah stood like a statue. She looked out the window, holding Asher, barely able to breathe. That night, Julian didn't return to the nursery. He didn't appear before Hannah. And for the first time in weeks, she cried again. Quiet tears without sound, lying beside her son, holding his little hand. Her tears fell silently on her cheeks. It's okay, she whispered. I was never part of his world anyway, right? The next day, as Hannah walked the hallway toward the nursery, she overheard a conversation. Julian, I didn't come here just to visit, said Valeria. We should get married before the year ends. Hannah froze behind the door. She held her chest tightly. Julian's voice was low. Valeria, a lot happened while you were away. What? Valeria laughed. That maid? Don't tell me you have feelings for her. She's basically your age. Hannah didn't hear what he said next. She couldn't take it. She left. Her steps heavy. Hannah picked him up and hugged him tight. Mommy's right here, she whispered. But inside, she no longer knew how long she could keep hiding everything, especially now that the woman who truly belonged in Julian's world had returned. Hannah's steps were heavy as she walked down the long hallway of the mansion. With every step came a rush of feelings she'd been trying to suppress. Pain, longing, and a farewell she never thought she'd have to make. Like the days before, Asher rested against her chest, fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the weight of his mother's decision. Weeks had passed since Valeria's arrival. Since then, Hannah felt Julian slipping back into the world he truly belonged to. A world of wealth, promises, and people who shared his status. A world where she didn't belong. She wasn't a model. She wasn't rich. And most of all, she wasn't Valeria. Each day, Hannah chose to stay out of sight. She avoided the hallways when Julian was around. She skipped dinner when he joined. She stopped catching his eyes because now that his fiancée was back, there was no more space for Hannah, no more place for her in the mansion, and certainly none in Julian's heart. One afternoon on the veranda, Hannah sat beside Don Julio, rocking Asher in her arms. He noticed her quiet demeanor and the heaviness in her words. "Don Julio," she said gently, "thank you for everything. If it weren't for you, I don't know how I would have survived." Don Julio's forehead wrinkled. "Why do you sound like you're saying goodbye?" Hannah didn't respond right away, but her resolve was clear. "We're going back to the province," she said. "Asher's father and we've reconciled. We want to start fresh. We'll be moving there." Don Julio turned to her, surprised. "Are you sure about this?" Hannah nodded. "Yes, I'm sorry if this is sudden." He fell silent, clearly concerned. But in her eyes, he saw the same strength he'd seen the first day they met. Strong, determined, a mother willing to sacrifice anything for her child. "If that's your decision," he said finally, "I won't stop you, but Hannah, know this. You and Asher will always have a place to come back to." She didn't answer. She simply hugged the old man. The next day, Hannah chose a time when Julian would be away. She knew he had a meeting scheduled at one of the family's real estate developments. She had planned this carefully. Quietly, she descended the stairs, carrying her worn-out backpack and a bag of Asher's clothes. No jewelry, no luxury, just a simple woman, a simple mother, a housemaid who happened to love a man she shouldn't have. She left one final embrace with Don Julio, a last glance at the room she had shared with her son, and a deep sigh in the hallway where her eyes had once met Julian's. When Julian returned around 1 p.m., the first thing he did was rush to the nursery. He wanted to see Asher. He wanted to see Hannah, but the crib was empty. No mattress, no diapers, no toys, nothing remained. He ran downstairs. "Grandpa, where's Hannah? Where's Asher?" Don Julio remained quiet. "They left, Julian." Julian froze. "What do you mean they left? Why?" She said she got back together with the baby's father. "They're moving to the province." Julian's world fell apart. "She didn't explain. She didn't even talk to me." Don Julio shook his head. Julian stood silently, but inside him, chaos, a whirlwind he couldn't explain. "Why does this hurt so much? Julian, are you even listening?" Valeria's voice cut sharply through the quiet as they stood in front of a prestigious wedding boutique in Manila. "Sorry," Julian answered coldly. "What did you say?" "You've been so distracted ever since I arrived," Valeria snapped. "What's going on with you? This wedding is 2 months away. You should be more involved." "I am," Julian replied, though even he could feel how little he meant it. Every time Valeria tried on a gown, he thought of Hannah's simple dress. Every flower arrangement reminded him of the dried blossoms Hannah had pinned above Asher's crib. In every laugh, in every plan, something was missing. And every night, he quietly opened his phone's gallery. There was Asher's photo, the green eyes, that little smile. "Why do you feel so important to me?" he would whisper into the dark. Meanwhile, in a small barangay in Quezon province, Hannah began building a new life for herself and Asher. She sold rice cakes again, sewed rugs, offered laundry services to nearby households. It was exhausting, but every time she looked at Asher, she knew she had made the right choice. Back in the city, Valeria's prenup shoot was in full planning mode. Yet, Julian couldn't shake his lack of enthusiasm. He had people quietly look into Hannah's whereabouts. One of his assistants finally came back with something. "Sir, it appears there's no man who returned to Miss Hannah's life," the assistant reported. "They're new to the village, no records of a previous address. There's no truth to what she said about the father of the baby returning." Julian felt the world drop from under him, like being splashed with cold water. The day of the wedding came. The church was packed with socialites, media, and elite families. The Julian Iero Valeria Iosta wedding, the union of empire and beauty. Dressed in an ivory barong, Julian stood at the altar, his heart pounded, not with joy, but with turmoil. He looked around, so many people. But someone was missing. He kept hoping she would appear, even when he had no right to hope. As everyone waited for the ceremony to begin, a man with an earpiece approached Julian. "Sir," he whispered urgently. "Emergency. Baby Asher is in the hospital. Seizures, critical condition." The world spun. Asher. Julian didn't wait. He looked at Don Julio in the front pew and shook his head. Valeria had just begun walking down the aisle. "I'm very sorry," Julian said, voice trembling. Gasps echoed through the church. Without waiting for a reply, he stepped down from the altar and ran out of the church. The media shouted his name. Valeria nearly fainted mid-aisle, but Julian heard none of it. Only one thing mattered. He needed to get to Hannah and Asher. Meanwhile, in a small hospital in Quezon, Hannah struggled to breathe as she watched her son connected to 4 tubes, still shaking. His hands trembled, his color faded. The fever triggered a mild seizure, the doctor said. I don't have money," Hannah pleaded, trying not to cry. "Please, just give him the medicine. Run the tests. I'll find a way to pay." "We're doing everything we can," the doctor replied. "But the labs and meds require payment." Hannah nearly passed out from the stress and guilt. "I can do this," she told herself. "I can do this alone, right?" Suddenly, the nurse rushed in. "Ma'am, everything's been paid. Someone just covered all expenses, including a DNA test for the baby." "What?" Hannah blinked. "DNA test?" Before she could ask more, the door swung open. And there he stood, the man she never thought she'd see at that moment. Julian, still wearing his wedding barong, wrinkled, sweaty, his eyes red from exhaustion. The first thing he did was walk straight to the crib. He gently touched Asher's forehead. "Hey," he whispered. "You okay now, little guy?" Hannah couldn't speak. She stood silently in the corner, gripping her worn-out bag, hands trembling. "Why are you here?" she asked faintly. Julian didn't look at her. His focus was on Asher. "I know the truth," he said. "There was no man who came back. You left because you didn't want to ruin my life." Hannah stayed quiet. Julian turned to her, and for the first time, all his emotions, concern, anger, shock, and realization, shone in his eyes. "Why didn't you answer me when I asked if I was Asher's father?" he asked. The room fell silent, but inside Hannah, it felt like drums were pounding. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the faint breath of a sleeping child. Hannah stood still, unsure if she was supposed to speak or cry. Julian waited. His chest rose and fell unevenly as he stood near Asher's crib, his hand gently resting on the child's tiny foot. "Hannah," he repeated, softer now. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" She didn't know how to explain the months of silence. How do you wrap pain, fear, shame, and love into one sentence? "I didn't want to cause problems," she whispered. "Problems?" Julian echoed. "That's what you think he is?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head, stepping forward. "Asher is my life, my miracle. I meant I didn't want you to feel obligated. You had your world. You were about to get married. And I didn't love her," he cut in. Hannah froze. Julian stepped closer. "I was going to marry Valeria because it made sense. It was what everyone expected. But I never loved her. I don't think I ever even tried to." He looked down at Asher again, then back at Hannah. "But you," he swallowed. "You came into my life when I didn't even know I needed you. And him, he brought me back to life." Tears streamed down Hannah's face. "But you were angry when we met again," she said. "You didn't even recognize me." "I didn't remember," he admitted. "That night, the club, the drinks. I blacked out." I woke up not knowing what happened, and I spent months feeling like something had gone missing. He looked her straight in the eyes. Now I know what I lost. Silence settled again, heavier this time. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I had a DNA test done yesterday. I had the lab rush it. He handed her the envelope. She didn't need to open it. She knew what it said, but Julian did. He unfolded it, held it out, and pointed to the line. Father, Julian Emanuel Asiero. Hannah stared at the words, her knees weakening. She had always known it, but now it was real, on paper, unchangeable. Julian stepped forward again, voice softer than she'd ever heard. Hannah, let me be his father. Her lips trembled. I don't need anything from you, she said. But I need him, Julian replied. And I need you. Hannah shook her head. I'm just a vendor, a single mom. I have nothing to offer. You gave me back my life, he interrupted. You gave me my son. You gave me something no money could buy. You're everything I didn't know I was missing. She cried harder, trying to look away, but Julian gently reached for her hand. I love him, he said, eyes locked on hers. And I'm falling for you. The weight of those words hit her like a wave. After months of fear and hiding, it felt like she could finally breathe. But what about your wedding? She asked. I left her at the altar, Julian said. I walked away from everything for you. For him. He stepped closer, and Hannah didn't back away. I'm not asking for a perfect life, he whispered. I just want a real one with both of you. Asher stirred in the crib. His eyes fluttered open. Julian leaned down and whispered, Hey, buddy. Daddy's here. The baby smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the man he somehow already recognized. Hannah covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. At last, she looked at Julian and answered the question she had avoided for so long. Yes, she whispered. You're his father, and I think I've loved you longer than I realized. Julian pulled her into a gentle embrace. Not the passionate kind from movies, but the kind that healed. The kind that promised something real, a new beginning, a family at last. 6 months later, the Iero mansion was no longer just a symbol of wealth and power. It had become a home filled with the laughter of a baby, the smell of morning pancakes, and the sound of love spoken in the smallest gestures. Julian and Hannah weren't in a hurry to marry. They knew love didn't need a deadline. They chose to build it slowly, day by day, with Asher as their bond. Every morning, Julian would lift Asher high into the air, making airplane sounds. Captain Asher, ready for takeoff. And every morning, the baby would giggle with uncontainable joy. Don Julio, once a man hardened by loss and empire, now spent afternoons lying on the floor, letting Asher crawl all over his stomach. This kid will take over the company someday, he'd joke, while Hannah fed him sweet rice balls she'd made from scratch. Valeria never returned. She left quietly, without a scandal, without noise. She knew when to walk away. She had always lived in the spotlight. She didn't need to chase someone else's. And Hannah, she began designing again. Small baby clothes. At first, Miss Terry had mailed her old sewing kit, and Julian had it mounted in a glass case as a reminder. You carried us with this, he said. Eventually, they opened a small boutique near the estate, a fusion of simplicity and class. Little Miracles was the name. Each piece sewn with the same love Hannah had for Asher. One Sunday morning, as they sat on the grass, Julian reached into his shirt pocket. Inside was a ring. Hannah, he said nervously, I know we've built this family backward. Baby first, love second, marriage last. But if you'd still want it, will you marry me? She didn't speak. She just cried, then nodded. And the three of them embraced, Asher between them, giggling, not knowing he had brought together a love story that began in the most unexpected place. Not every beginning is perfect. Some are messy, some are painful. Some start with a single mistake. But with love, courage, and truth, they can still find their way home. And Hannah, Julian, and Asher, they finally did. Don't miss more incredible stories like this. Subscribe to Dark Voices for tales that touch the heart and soul.